Your slideshow.
Yeah, where is that at?
Top, fourth, fifth one over. See where it says home? Go to your right.
Oh, right here?
Yeah, and just start from beginning. All that's left, up top.
Okay.
Now the clicker should work for you.
All right.
You're good to go. Make sure the timekeeper's ready before you start.
All right.
You don't need to keep a running list of speeches on this one.
You don't have to keep a what, running list of what?
Of the speeches. You just have to do the peer evaluations.
All right. Is everyone ready? Camera? And timekeeper.
All right.
You don't have to hold up fingers or anything for me.
Okay.
I'll just keep time myself.
All right. When you're ready.
All right. Well, good morning. My name is actually still Luke Sears. A couple of weeks ago in my informative speech, I talked about the flood of the Bible. Today I'm going to show you evidence that Noah's flood is more believable than you might have realized. It's not Sunday, but I'm going to read you a Bible story anyway. About 4,000 years ago, there was a righteous man named Noah. One day, Mr. Noah went on his morning stroll. All of a sudden, there was a light from heaven, and God starts talking to him. He says, "Noah, the thoughts of every man on the earth are constantly evil. So I've decided to wipe off the face of the world and flood the whole world with water." Noah looks up and says, "Okay." And God told Noah how he, his family, and 2 of every kind of animal were to be saved from destruction. After God was finished talking, Noah came back to his wife and 3 married sons and said, "Boys, go for wood. We've got to make a boat." So after 120 years, Noah and his family finally finished the ark. God brought Noah all of the animals, and Noah and his family got inside, prepared to bed and feed all of the animals for however long the flood might be. God closed the door, and the fountains of the deep were then opened. It rained for 40 days and 40 nights straight, though the total time they were in the ark from when they went in to the time they left was over a year. And when it was time, God said, "Okay, Noah, you can come out now." So Noah and his family ran outside as animals pranced and birds flew overhead as a rainbow spread across the sky as a promise that God would never flood the earth again. That would be the watered down version, pun intended. What's this?
Noah's Ark.
Noah's Ark, right. Though I don't think it looked exactly like that. Here's a replica I made this past week to give you a better idea of what it may have looked like. And if you notice the scale of the truck in the corner, to give you an idea of the size. According to Genesis 6:15, the ark is 30 cubits tall, 50 cubits wide, and 300 cubits long. If you looked at the dictionary I looked at, it would tell you that a cubit is from 17 to 22 inches long. A cubit was based on the length of a man's arm from the tip of his middle finger to the end of his elbow. I have about a 19.5-inch cubit. So the ark was about 450 feet long, 75 feet wide, and 45 feet tall. Imagine that there was a boat resting on a football field and a half, not including end zones, and that's about how long the ark would have been. The Bible says it rained for 40 days and 40 nights, though the ark actually floated over the earth for 150 days and sat on the mountains of Ararat for 228 days. Altogether, Noah and his family were in the ark for 378 days. I got this information from a book that John Morris wrote, and it's all recorded in the Bible. Now that you have an idea of my perspective, I'd like to get into some evidence to support my theories. If you're an evolutionist, then more than likely you believe that dinosaurs lived and died before humans ever existed. I believe the Bible, which says in Genesis 1:24 through 27, that land animals and people were created on day 6, so of course dinosaurs lived with people. I have evidence to prove that dinosaurs did live with people, but due to something called time, I will not be able to share that with you now. If you're interested, please talk to me about it later. I'd be happy to share it with you. Now, you might be wondering, okay, Even if dinosaurs did live with man, there would be no way to get dinosaurs like Brachiosaurus and Apatosaurus onto the Ark. As Ken Ham says, it is true that some of the skeletons of the dinosaurs that have been discovered are huge. For instance, scientists estimate that T-Rex grew up to 20 feet tall, 50 feet long, and weighed 10 tons. One of the largest dinosaurs, Ultrasaurus, is estimated to have weighed 55 tons, with a height of 52 feet and a length of 82 feet. And you know what? I think it would be a major problem to get those dinosaurs on the Ark and feed them for a year. But dinosaurs are reptiles. Some reptiles constantly grow. They don't reach an adult stage. So likely these dinosaurs that people observe are grandparent dinosaurs, so to speak. So my point is, why find the biggest possible dinosaurs? Why not get immature animals? That way you could maintain the animals much more efficiently. And also, what's the purpose of the animals after they get off the Ark? It would be to populate the Earth. So if they were immature, then it would give them much more time to reproduce after the flood. Another argument to the irrelevancy of the Ark is there's no possible way to get every animal needed on the Ark. One thing you have to determine is what animals have to go inside the Ark. According to the Bible, 2 of every kind of animal are to go in the Ark. Last speech I talked about micro and macro evolution. Does anybody remember what microevolution, also known as natural selection, is? It would be changes and adaptations within one's own kind. So all you need is 2 canines and 2 felines. You don't need 2 lions, 2 tigers, and 2 cougars. They're all in the feline kind. You just need 2, and then over thousands of years it'll adapt and change to what we see today, which is simply an incredible variety of cats. According to Dr. Gish, today there are about 20,000 species of land-dwelling, air-breathing creatures in existence, i.e. mammals, birds, reptiles, and amphibians. If we were to assume that another 20,000 species have become extinct, then 40,000 species, or 80,000 animals, had to fit on the Ark. The Ark was about 450 feet long, 45 feet high, and 75 feet wide. That means that with its 3 decks, the Ark had slightly more than 100,000 square feet of floor space. These 80,000 animals could be caged in an area of approximately 50,000 square feet, leaving half the Ark's space for storage of food, airspace, and living space for Noah and his family." End quote. There's also the theory that many of the animals hibernated during this time, which would cut down on the consumption of food significantly. Now I'd like to talk about some evidence of fossils. Where do we find fossils? It'd be in rock layers all over the world. I believe that almost everyone would say that most fossils were deposited in very moist conditions. Now, if there was a worldwide flood, where would we expect to find fossils? All over the world, even on Mount Everest. There are fossilized clams found on Mount Everest, and there's something strange about these clams. What happens when a clam or mussel dies? They open. What's curious about these fossilized clams is they're all closed, so they had to be buried alive. I have a theory about how they could fossilize. About 4,000 years ago, there was a flood. It was worldwide, and in a very short time, it fossilized practically everything we see today, including these clams, which fossilized very quickly. Now I'd like to talk to you about some rock formations, starting with Grand Canyon. There are hundreds of pretty evenly distributed layers all throughout the Grand Canyon. And that actually doesn't line up with the theory of one rock layer being laid down after another over millions of years. What I'm about to show you is what would happen if there was a time gap in between when the layers were laid down. So here are 3 rock layers that were laid down. And over a little bit of time, because it's exposed to the weather, there's some erosion. And then due to a flood or an earthquake, 2 more layers are laid down. And basically this keeps on happening over and over again until you have a rock wall that looks something like this. As you see, it doesn't look too pretty. There are risings and fallings all throughout that wall because there was erosion within the rock layers. But that's not what we observe at Grand Canyon. There's no evidence of erosion in between the layers. Now on the top, there's been a lot of erosion, but there's no evidence in between. Now how could that happen? Well, I have a theory about that. About 4,000 years ago, there was a flood. It was worldwide and actually laid down most of the layers in a very short amount of time. On May 18th in the year 1980, Mount St. Helens erupted. Eruption that killed 57 people and cost over $1 billion worth of property damage, as described by Steve Nash. The eruption's first phase was the largest avalanche in recorded history, most of which quickly moved 23 kilometers at speeds up to 70 meters per second to bury a wide area. This was followed within seconds by a 250 degrees Celsius stone-filled lateral blast cloud that quickly outpaced the avalanche, scouring, scorching, or toppling nearly everything over a 600 square kilometer arc. Over the ensuing 9 hours, the vertical component of the blast elevated a cubic kilometer of matter up to 27 kilometers into the sky, a column that rained ash over 11 states." End quote. That eruption would have been amazing to see. Now, during this incredible event, there was erosion. Here is one wall that was formed during the eruption of Mount St. Helens. And if you notice the rock layers in that wall, they look kind of familiar, don't you think? So my point with comparing Grand Canyon and Mount St. Helens is simply this. Why is it so absurd to assume that Grand Canyon was formed in a short time when we see evidence of rock walls being formed today? Well, I've talked about many different things concerning creation in these last two speeches. I've talked about intelligent design, I've commented on natural selection, and today I talked about Noah's flood, looking at fossils, Grand Canyon, and Mount St. Helens. My intent is not to dazzle you with all my amazing knowledge on the subject, but rather it's my intention to give you an idea of what the world looks like through my eyes. A world that was specifically designed and created by a wonderful creator who didn't just create to show his ultimate power, but he created for our enjoyment as well. Well, thank you for your attention and patience with all my speeches. If you have any questions about what I talked about today or 2 weeks ago, feel free to ask me about it. I don't think I need to tell you that I would be happy to talk to you about it. And so with that, have a great rest of the summer. Thank you very much.
Time?
10:55.